Well, thanks for having me today. My name's Devin Olsen, and I am a signature tyer for Fulling Mill. And today we're going to be tying one of my signature patterns that'll be coming out in the 2025 catalog, which is the Straggle stone. So we're going to start. We've got a Jig Force long hook here with a 3.8 millimeter bead on it, and we're going to add just a little bit of 15 thousandths lead wire to the body here. You can obviously vary the size of that wire to get different weights if you want. It's as much just to bulk up the body a little bit as anything here. So I've put some super glue on the shank, and I'm just going to do touching turns. We're going to fill about maybe 2/3 of the shank here. And you can wrap all the way until that bead is locked in place, and then just break it off. And normally with lead wire like that, you'll kind of get that little straggling piece. So if you can, tuck that in behind the bead with your thumbnail or with the scissors. All right, now I've got some 8/0 camel thread here, and we're just going to make one quick up and down on that thread to give it one more lock up in place. And then come to the back of the hook, and we're going to tie in some tails first. And I have some brown Flex-Floss here that are going to be my tails and my legs. And we want to tie this in on the far side of the shank, and then we're going to fold half of it to the near side. So we start with the longer piece. This is maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. Pinch it in your fingers and put it on the far side of the shank, and then put the thread in between those fingers as well. Go around the bottom of the hook shank and then back up, and then let the thread slip. That's called a pinch wrap. That'll lock that fiber in place on the far side of the hook like it just did. And then I maybe put 2 wraps just to move it a little bit up the shank, pull that fiber to my side of the hook, and lock it down again. And now I've got split tails. And I'll just trim those so they're even. And there you go. And then the specific order of the materials becomes a little bit important on this fly. So now we got to tie in what's kind of the shellback. So we have some of the Fulling Mill bug back here, and there is a glossy and a matte side. I want to tie this in. I want the glossy side showing at the end. So in order to tie it in so that we get that, we actually tie it in with the matte side up first. And as you'll notice, I've cut a little bit of a bevel or a point on that with scissors and taken it off the paper backing. If you don't cut that tip, when you tie it in, it can be a little bit, it likes to roll, basically. The other thing I want to do as I'm tying this in, one of the common mistakes on this fly is you don't get the thread all the way back to where those tails are tied in. So I usually fold it up real quick, make sure that I've covered it all the way back. If I haven't, I'm going to make a couple more wraps, which I hadn't there. I want to go all the way until I'm to those tails, but not over the top of them. So there we go. I'm in place. And then I'm going to tie in my copper wire. So I just have some small copper wire here. You could go a little bit larger as well. You don't want to go with like ultra fine wire, because then it typically will get broken by trout's teeth fairly quickly, and that wire on this is going to hold down that shellback, so it is fairly important. You don't want it to break. Now I've got some micro streamer straggle here from Fulling Mill in chocolate brown, and we're going to go ahead and do a pinch wrap there to just lock that in place and tie it down, move the thread back to where I have the bug back tied in. And then I'm just going to fill a little bit of that gap with the thread here so that I don't get kind of a valley in the fly. All right, Then I want to move my thread about 2/3 of the way up the hook shank, and I'm going to put a whip finish in it here, just a 1 or 2 turn whip finish, and then use my bobbin cradle so that I can use the rotary function, and we're going to go ahead and just wrap this micro straggle. You want touching turns, don't leave any gaps, and you can also kind of wrap over itself if you need to build up a little body. I don't want this stone super thick because that will affect the sink rate, but I also don't want it extremely thin either. All right, once that's there, go ahead and tie that down. Now you could leave that there because we're actually going to use the same material on the thorax, but it's easier to get it out of the way of the rubber legs I'm going to put on. So I usually trim it off and then retie it on later. Next step, we're going to pull that bug back over and lock it down. The one thing that tends to happen here, sometimes the near side of this, I'll see if I can rotate it so you can see it. Sometimes that near side gets folded up by the thread. So I like to just drape the thread over it on the first wrap to let that bug back settle and then apply some tension. Once that's there, go ahead and wrap your wire through, and the same thing can happen with the wire, and you can also trap the straggle fiber. So I kind of weave my way through it, go light over the back, then put tension on it as I come down, weave over the back, tension, weave over the back, tension, and one final one here. Then tie it off. I like to tie it off under or on the near side of the fly here to really lock it down with the half wrap, and then just break that off. Then take your bug back and fold it toward the rear of the fly and lock it down again. And now we're going to add some rubber legs. So I have the same material, the Flex-Floss, and I'm going to trap it on the far side with my index finger here. Same thing, do a pinch wrap, go loosen your fingers around the bottom, and then come up and lock it in place. And then I move that forward, lock it in behind the bead, and also travel back and lock it in right where I have that tie-in point on the bug back. And one common issue that most people do is not put enough wraps on the rubber legs, so they end up slipping later on. So one of the reasons why I still use fairly thin thread on this fly is so I can put extra wraps on the rubber legs without building up bulk. And then you make sure that you don't lose your rubber legs later. Okay, and then for the other rubber leg, I use my thumb instead of my index finger and put it against the shank. And went a little short there. And you can lock that in. Okay, so like I said, I'm just going to do a few extra turns to make sure that both of those legs are locked in tight. And now I'm going to go back and put that straggle string back on. Tie that in. And I'm going to use the rotary function again, so I'll put a whip finish behind the bead. You want to just do one turn on that little hump. You're going to have a little bit of bulk right here where you've tied the bug back down and then folded it back, so don't put extra there. You're going to move forward, and then I'm going to actually wrap back over to fill in that valley. And then go ahead and tie this off. And I'm not putting extra wraps up by the bead because the bug back is going to end up filling that little gap there. So you don't want to put extra material there, else you're basically going to crowd the thread onto the bead when you tie it off. Okay. Then all you do here is just take that same bug back, fold it over, tie it down to form your wing case there, and then to make sure it stays locked in, I fold it back and just tie it down again. and we'll whip finish. And I always like to add super glue to my whip finish. A lot of people just put extra whip finishes in, but I really don't want this fly to fall apart. So I put it on the thread first, make 1 or 2 wraps, and then do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish on top of that. And that locks all those thread wraps in. Now, once you're done with that, you can do something cutesy if you want and make the wing case into an actual wing case looking thing if you want to cut a little wing pad out of it like I just did. Of course, if you do it like I just did and it's not symmetrical, then it looks goofy. So I'll fix that. So I've cut just a little wing notch in it. You don't have to do that. You could easily just trim it off flush, and to be honest, that's what I do most of the time with my own flies because it doesn't make any difference to the fish. But if you really want it to have that little extra realism, you can cut those notches in it. And then I'm just going to even up the legs here. Make sure they're semi-symmetrical on both sides. And that's it. That is the finished Straggle stone. You got that little bit of flash on the bottom. Still a little bit of a two-tone. You can mix up the colors on this for obviously any specific stone that you have in your local water. And a lot of times I'll do, I have a lot of stones in some places where there's sort of a light ventral surface and a dark dorsal surface. So you can go with a dark brown there and a really light colored bottom if you want. Or you can go full on black for a salmon fly. Or you can do the magneto stone that I do for steelhead that has been probably my best steelhead pattern over the years, which is this one with a purple back, a black front, and a pink bead here. So anyway, it's pretty easy stonefly to tie compared to some, and I'm confident it'll get you some fish.